Welcome to the October edition of What's in Bloom at the Ruth Bancroft Garden. So fall is in the air. It's a little cooler at night now, but it sure feels like summer during the daytime. Every month we put together a listing of plants that are in flower in that particular month at the garden, and we make a sheet that we hand out to our visitors to the garden. So we're going to run through the things that are on the October sheet. And we're starting with Trichostema Midnight Magic. So this is in the Lamiaceae family, or the mint family, and it is a hybrid between two different species of Trichostema. And one of those is woolly blue curls, which is a well-known California native. We really like this plant because it flowers for a very long period all summer long and into the fall. And it's still in flower now. We have bees visiting the flowers as I speak. Trichostema Midnight Magic. Next up on our list this month is Aloe Vaseline. So that's this little guy here. This is an aloe that comes from the Arabian Peninsula in Yemen and Saudi Arabia. This particular form with the pinkish flower is actually from Saudi Arabia. So it's a fall blooming aloe, and although we associate the winter months with aloes in bloom, and there are many of them that bloom in the winter, there are others that bloom at other times of the year, and this one is a regular fall bloomer, Aloe Vaseline. The next plant on our October list is Xanthorrhoea Quadrangulotta. So the Xanthorrhoeas are an interesting Australian group, and their common name is Australian grass tree. And some of them do in time develop a trunk, but they're very slow growing. And this one, even after decades, does not have a trunk at all. I don't know whether it will eventually get one, but anyhow, the leaves are needle-like and blue-green, and the stalk comes up on this particular species at this time of the year, around the late summer, early fall. And it almost looks like a pipe cleaner, and there are little tiny white flowers emerging from a green sea of bracts. It's really quite a wonderful plant, and kind of a rare one too, Xanthorrhoea Quadrangulotta. We had a look at an aloe from the Arabian Peninsula, Aloe Vaseline, but a lot more of the aloes that we have in our gardens here in California come from South Africa. South Africa is far enough away from the equator that they have seasons, and it's more like our growing conditions. And so this is a good example. This is Aloe reitzii from northeastern South Africa. And whereas a lot of the aloes bloom in the wintertime, this one is a definite end of summer, early fall bloomer. And so here it is in all its glory in October. Aloe reitzii is a single aloe, so we have several plants, but they're all separate seedlings. It doesn't make offsets. But really glorious spires of flowers in almost neon colors. Aloe reitzii. Echeveria is a large group of rosette-forming plants, and most of them come from Mexico. Different ones bloom at different times of the year, but here we have an Echeveria Lilacina hybrid that's just coming into flower now in the fall. It's got a very beautiful compact rosette of pale leaves, and then these arching shepherd's crook flowers that are just beginning to open now with a soft pastel pinkish orange color. Echeveria Lilacina hybrid. Senecio is a very large genus in the daisy family with a distribution around the world, but there are quite a few succulent ones native to Africa. And this is an example. This is Senecio ficoides, a cultivar called Skyscraper because it grows extra tall. And it has these little tiny white flowers, but really the reason we grow it is for the beautiful blue, chalky blue leaves. And you can see that on full display here. This one grows much taller than the regular form of the species would, and stays erect for quite a long time, but eventually the stems do flop over, and then we cut them off to keep the verticality. Senecio ficoides Skyscraper. This shrub with the showy red flowers is Russelia Equisetiformis. So the name Equisetiformis is a reference to the horsetail, Equisetum. And this plant has very, very tiny leaves, and really what you see is the green stems, and they're somewhat reminiscent of a horsetail, and that's how it got its name. but it comes from southern Mexico and Guatemala and is really just an avalanche of flowers all summer long. The foliage kind of arches over and weeps, and the beautiful bright red flowers really make it a showpiece. There are other color forms, pink and yellow and maybe even white, but red is the usual. Russelia Equisetiformis. The agaves are all native to the Americas, from the southwestern United States down through Mexico and Central America to northern South America. And most of them have wider leaves than this one, either triangular or sword-like leaves, but this one is Agave striata with very narrow, more needle-like leaves. And it also has a wonderful flower with bright green flowers. So this one comes from a wide swath of north central and northeastern Mexico, and it does clump in time to become a many-headed plant, but this one's just starting to do that. Agave striata. Opuntias are commonly known as prickly pears, and there are really an extraordinary range of species over a large geographical area, bigger than any other group of cacti. At the north, they go all the way up into Canada, and at the south, all the way down to Argentina. Some of them are creeping along the ground, very small plants, and others grow large and eventually develop a trunk. And that's true of this one, Opuntia leucotricha from central Mexico. So the name leucotricha means white hair, and that's because the old spines persist as the old pads harden into a trunk, and it looks like hairs on the trunk. The fruits are a pale yellow color. They come this time of the year, and there's really a lot of them on it right now. Opuntia leucotricha. Well, here we have another prickly pear. This one is Opuntia gomei Old Mexico. The cultivar name is Old Mexico, and it differs from other prickly pears in these wavy edges on the pads. Normally those are more rounded on most prickly pears. This one comes from Texas and into northeast Mexico, and the fruits start out green and then they begin to turn a reddish purple color. That color change is just starting now. Opuntia gomei Old Mexico. The name of this plant is Hesperaloe nocturna. So the Hesperaloes are in the same family with the agaves and the yuccas, and the name Hesperaloe, Hesperus is the west wind, and it has a relative with red aloe-like flowers, and that's the reason for the name, but it's really not related to the aloes, it's related to the agaves. And this one does not have any red in the flower. The flowers are white, and they open at night and are pollinated by moths. Hesperaloe nocturna, because it's nocturnal, the flowers opening at night. The rosettes form 6-foot tall leaves, narrow leaves that arch over and have little curling threads at their margins, like many members of the agave family. Hesperaloe nocturna. The tree I'm standing under is Ceiba speciosa, or the old name is Curator speciosa, and it's in the hibiscus family, Malvaceae. Formerly it was placed in a smaller family, the Bombaceae, but that's now been included into the hibiscus family. At any rate, it's an incredibly beautiful South American tree with spines on its trunk and these enormous, large, deep pink flowers that come in the fall, not when most trees bloom. It's a little far north for it here in Walnut Creek. You see it a lot in Southern California and in the tropics all over the world, but we're at the northern end of where you can actually grow it. It's just wonderful to have it burst into bloom in the fall when other trees aren't even thinking of blooming, and making a big display of large pink flowers. Ceiba speciosa. Mexico has many kinds of echeverias, and amongst them is a very large growing one from southern Mexico called Echeveria gibiflora. And this is an example, but it's an unusual example. It's a cultivar called Mauna Loa, and it has these great big bumps on the leaves, which is not typical of Echeveria gibiflora in general. And these are called carunculations, and they are an odd feature that collectors favor, and so plants like this are bred for that feature. This is just coming into bloom with these flower spikes rising up, and it has nodding pink flowers, and it blooms through the fall and winter. Echeveria Mauna Loa. Aloes belong to the family Asphodelaceae, and they are one of the larger genera in that family. They occur mostly in Africa, but also in Arabia, as we've seen with Aloe Vaseline, and some of them also from Madagascar. This one here is Aloe secundiflora from East Africa. And the name secundiflora means that the flowers are secund, or in other words, all arranged along one side of the flower stalk rather than all the way around. And this is not one you see commonly in cultivation, but just coming into flower now. It's in bud, but we will include pictures showing the open flowers so you can see what those look like too. Aloe secundiflora. Here we have another Echeveria, Echeveria gigantea. It's closely related to Echeveria gibiflora, whose cultivar Mauna Loa we saw, but this one starts to flower a little bit earlier. It's already well along on its flowering, and it comes also from southern Mexico, and the very large leaves are responsible for its name, Echeveria gigantea. And it really has lots of flower stalks coming out of the one rosette, so it's going to be in flower for quite some time. Echeveria gigantea. The Gasterias are related to the aloes and also in the family Asphodelaceae, but they are a smaller group and more localized geographically, with almost all of them coming from South Africa. This is one of the larger ones, Gasteria acinicifolia, and its probably biggest blooming time is in the spring, but it does have flowers at various times of the year, and it's in flower now. The flowers are dangling and sort of a coral color towards the one end and green striped toward the mouth. And they're attractive to hummingbirds, which visit them. Although in habitat, they don't have hummingbirds in South Africa, they have sunbirds. So the hummingbirds take over for the same kinds of flowers that have nectar in them that the sunbirds would visit in Africa. Gasteria acinicifolia. Sedum is the biggest group in the crassula family, or the stonecrop family, and there are quite a few of them from Mexico, and that's the case with this one, Sedum Oaxacanum, named after the state of Oaxaca in southern Mexico. It has bright yellow flowers, as you can see on it right now, and blooms over a long period of time during the warm months. It's kind of a ground cover plant and spreads as it goes, and never gets very tall. Sedum Oaxacanum. Also Mexican in origin is our next plant, and that's a mangave, and it's called mangave snow leopard. And a mangave is a cross between an agave and a manfreda. Manfredas are close relatives of the agaves, but they have soft leaves and oftentimes purple spots, and people cross them with agaves to get those purple spots, which are a prized horticultural character. Manfredas don't tend to be that long before they flower, whereas agaves can go for decades. And here we have snow leopard sending up its stalk, and that's the first time it's flowered for us, so we're quite excited to have it in flower. This is a beautiful cultivar with purple spotted leaves with very pale yellow margins that really make a striking contrast. Mangave snow leopard. This bush is Grevillea king's fire. So Grevillea is a large genus in the Protea family, and they come from Australia. And there's really quite a lot of species, both in Western Australia, where it's winter rainfall, and in Eastern Australia, where it's summer rainfall. And many of them are grown around the world because they're so nice as ornamentals. The hybridizers are hard at work on these things, and new ones are always coming out. This one has not been on the market all that long, Grevillea king's fire, but we've had just amazing success with it. The bees love it, the hummingbirds love it, and we love it. And it's on What's in Bloom quite a lot because it blooms so much. Grevillea king's fire. The whole idea of What's in Bloom is to feature things that are in bloom in that particular month. But sometimes we get color from another source, from the fruits, as we've seen with the prickly pears. And that's the case with the jelly palm here. So it flowered a little bit earlier in the summer, and now it's producing the fruits, which come in cascades. They initially are green, and then they start to turn yellow-orange as they ripen, and they really are quite showy as well. They call this the jelly palm, Butea capitata. It's a South American palm, and that's because the fruits are quite delicious and can be made into jelly. You can also eat them as they are, and we feature them on our fruit tasting tours when we have those in the fall. Butea capitata. Our last plant on this What's in Bloom is a hybrid. So I've made a lot of aloe hybrids. I like the color yellow a lot, so a lot of them have yellow parentage, and that's the case with this one. It has Aloe zub from Sudan as its yellow parent, and then Aloe elegans from Ethiopia as an orangey flowered parent. And so together we get this nice yellow-orange combination. And this one is kind of a repeat bloomer, so we have some that have already gone by and are making seeds now, others that are in flower now, and then yet others that are just starting. So that's kind of nice because it keeps the blooming season going. It is a clumping plant, but not terrifically so. So this is only after many years that it's become a clump of this size. Aloe zub X elegans. Well, we've gone through the plants that are on this month's What's in Bloom list, but I always like to remind everybody that there are lots of things in the garden that are in bloom at any given day that aren't on the list. Things that don't last long enough, things that bloom partly in one month and partly in another, but not enough in either. Things that just there isn't room for on the list. And a good example is this wonderful aloe here. This is Aloe cryptopoda from South Africa, looking quite glorious with its spires of red flowers. Thank you very much for watching this, and you can come back and check out another edition next month.